we can't decouple Bitcoin from crypto.
In the Bitcoin maximalist view of the world, you are committing blasphemy by even mentioning the word crypto. Is it important to look at what else is happening in the crypto ecosystem?
I think it is important to look. Part of the Bitcoin only meme, it's not actually Bitcoin only, it's Bitcoin and fiat. Say that you have a shitcoin exchange. We can't go to them and say, you guys are assholes, you're scamming people, but also can you please add Lightning?
No, that's exactly what Bitcoiners do though. There are companies that claim to be Bitcoin only, but they take user funds and they store it in a custodian that is not Bitcoin only. All right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Sergej here with me. I thought a great place that we could start this conversation was around the importance of a circular economy. You gave a speech recently on Pizza Day, and I thought that specific topic could use some more elaboration. And so maybe explain what is a circular economy and why is it so important in the context of Bitcoin?
Right. Well, whatever vision I think that you may have for Bitcoin, for cryptocurrency, whatever it is, like all of the benefits of it only really start to materialize in a big way in a world where money circulates within the internet layer, right? In a lot of ways, today we're in this weird stage where most or much of the activity happens on a regulated exchange that is an extension of the banks, right? So it's you're doing the bank stuff to get your coins, and then you do your crypto stuff, and then you need the bank to get off, which is very weird and inconvenient, and creates this hilarious irony of the industry saying "fuck the banks" on one hand, but on the other hand, please give us a bank account. Right, and so we're always in this weird tension, and it's in some ways it's like if someone invented email today with all the tech that we have, and people would be like writing emails on paper and then like snapping a picture with their iPhone and emailing the picture and then printing it on the other side. Like it's still useful for some stuff, but like once it can circulate in the cloud, that's when we really start to see all of the benefits in terms of, the privacy, censorship resistance, flow of money, flow of value, all of these things. And so I think, what we've been doing at Bitrefill for soon 8 years now is to try to further that, right? To create a world where people can be comfortable with keeping their money in Bitcoin, with keeping their money in the cloud, knowing that when it becomes time for me to buy something with that money, I will be able to do so. Right? Because what kind of a shitty internet money do we have otherwise if you can't buy stuff with it? So we kind of like the circular economy obviously is it requires a full circle. We're part of that. We're the chicken side of the chicken and egg. We still need eggs. We still need ways for people to get their coins, to earn them or whatever. But at least we provide the leading, to my knowledge, in the world place for people to actually spend their coins.
So when we think of this circular economy, part of it is that the legacy finance system is a circular economy, right? If you take like the dollar-based system, I can get paid in dollars, I save in dollars, I invest in dollars, I spend dollars, I pay my taxes in dollars, and it always is, it kind of circulates within this dollar-denominated system, and it works. Now, as there is a rise of, we can call the new digital financial system, in some way, we have to rely on that legacy system, bank accounts, and some of these things. So there's connectivity or there's some foundation that is still being used. Is the thought process that eventually these two systems will completely splinter from each other and the new digital financial system will need to stand on its own and be its own circular economy without any dependence on the legacy system? Or is there a world where we have a circular economy of, using Bitcoin, saving in Bitcoin, but still there is maybe some interaction, connectivity, or reliance on the legacy financial system at the same time? Like, how do you see these two systems interacting with each other, maybe in the steady state, 2 decades from now?
It's an excellent question, and I think different people have different views on that. I think that interaction is good, but if we don't have our own the more cypherpunky thing to fall back on, then we will always be in a problematic situation when it comes to the powers that be. We will always be in the please give us a bank account phase of things. So in a lot of ways, it has a lot of benefit, even for the people that don't actively use it on a regular basis. The knowledge that there is a crypto economy where I can spend my coins without going back into the traditional system. So I think there is, obviously a lot of overlap and bridge points, right? And all of the different exchanges and so on are that. But yeah, I think a realistic scenario. I mean, look at how I look at all of these things, like how internet technologies have evolved at least within my lifetime, which is like, yeah, we have the internet. We still have phones. We can still, we could have had this conversation over a phone call, over a traditional phone line, but we choose to do it over the internet because it's better. So there's still a postal service, even though you can send an email at zero cost. So it's good to be able to interface with the old world, and I think we will always need to. And the old world is super entrenched, right? And I mean, if you look at the history of Bitcoin and the world in which Bitcoin arose and how it happened, I see it as one of these things that, if you've ever worked with programmers, there is at some point a situation where a programmer gets fed up with a particular problem and he just codes a massive detour around it just to fuck this thing. Right, and Bitcoin is like that for money, but the nerds coded it all the way back from gold level and all the way up to the payments level, and are trying to build their entirely own standalone thing. And so from that perspective, yes, it takes a lot of time. And obviously, the governments that control the money machines and so on are not going to be the primary allies of that. And probably the realistic best case scenario is for them to let it happen. The laissez-faire type approach that we've seen in many democratic countries when it comes to the internet, for example.
What's fascinating is you're talking about this workaround, this idea of if you want to actually use software to go around a problem, an obstacle, some sort of friction. Most people would say, cool, let's just go build a payment system. Let's go build, some sort of financial service. And I think maybe in the fintech sector, that's what you see people trying to do, is they're almost looking at the micro problems and they're saying, hey, banks suck, or there's not a lot of good connectivity on the internet to the banking system. Let's go route around that with software. But Bitcoin, as you mentioned, is something that is a much more ambitious project. It's saying, no, actually, it's not just the micro problem. There's a macro problem with the money itself. And so we have to go all the way back in the most first principles approach possible and rebuild from scratch. Now, when we see that, how much of the folks and the companies that are working on the micro problem, how important are they? So if it's things like a Stripe or there's some sort of Plaid, which is like banking connectivity, those micro solutions that are definitely improvements to the legacy financial world, but they still are using the old money or using some of the old system. Are they important as part of this movement, or should every single developer at those companies kind of throw their hands up, say, hey, I'm working on a micro problem. Let me go and work on the macro problem, which is this Bitcoin project that, if we really come at it from a first principle standpoint, is a completely different thing. Like, how do you think about the maybe value and contribution to pushing forward finance to billions and billions of people between micro and macro?
I think they overlap as well. Like, I think at this point, it's very hard to say where crypto ends and fintech begins and so on. They are the same, and that is the course of it is that eventually it will merge entirely in the end. I mean, in terms of like companies, I'm a bit old school in the sense that I believe that the company's purpose is to generate revenues and profits for shareholders and some kind of benefit to customers, right? So in some cases, a company may see that, hey, let's go for the easy route where we can get instant traction versus working on this thing that requires massive society level behavioral change and whatnot, right? And so I don't think that they should be blamed for it in any way, and I do think that it is helpful. Like if we look at just the overall trajectory of any money type system, including airplane miles and so on, is that we're very clearly on a slope towards things that have higher liquidity, right? And whenever somebody tries to create a thing that has like bad liquidity, like airplane points, then somebody creates a marketplace for them, right, to make them tradable for other types of monies and other things and so on. So and that's the same that fintech is, right? I mean, all fintech is just updating numbers in somebody else's database, right? At the end of the day, we don't produce a thing. We don't have factories. We just connect APIs basically and build UIs for these things, and that is of course useful. And I mean, who's going to say that that a fintech that is used by tens of millions of people is not useful? Obviously, it's useful.
When you see the circular economy, how important is it that people are able to convert fiat currencies, so take my dollars and buy Bitcoin versus maybe mine Bitcoin versus getting paid in Bitcoin, right? Like how important is the circular economy, or what is the dependence on the insertion point of the money being paying people directly versus just simply converting old currency into the new currency? Is there a difference, or should we really focus on one or the other?
No, I think it's all good. I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job on the case where we convert other kinds of money into Bitcoin. Maybe not as much on the how to get paid in it and so on. I mean, one thing that we've discovered at Bitrefill over the years in terms of like figuring out like how to market transactional cryptocurrency based consumer service is obviously that not all cryptocurrency holders are going to be potential customers of this, simply due to the fact that they don't want to spend their coins. They want to save them because the value might go up. Right. So what we look at a lot is for people who have coins to spend. Right. And if you just think of it, okay, coins to spend, how can somebody end up with coins to spend? Well, they maybe bought Bitcoin 5 years ago and it went up in value. But maybe they get their paycheck in Bitcoin, right? And if you get your paycheck in Bitcoin, then you're almost certainly going to have coins to spend, and you're going to be a factor in this economy. So I think it is actually quite important. But as we discussed before the call, like I'm not a fan of sort of guilting people that this is what you should be doing in order to be a good Bitcoiner. I think you should do whatever makes sense for you to live your life in the best way. And I think when it comes to builders, then yes, I think it's important for builders to think about, there are people in the world today that will gladly take an income in Bitcoin. Who are they? What kind of work do they do? How can we provide a service for them? How can we market it to them? And all of these things. I think there's a lot of opportunity to build things. And some of my favorite projects in the space are things that are doing exactly that.
Yeah. When I think about you have this framework that always sticks to the top of my head, which is the difference between Bitcoin, the movement, and Bitcoin, the tool. You've talked about this during your Pizza Day talk, and I've heard you mention it in other forms as well. Describe a little bit kind of this framework. Like, what is Bitcoin, the movement, and how does that differentiate from Bitcoin, the tool?
Sure. So when it comes to, a very simple example, Bitcoin is both, right? Bitcoin, the tool, is the thing that you use. You send transactions, you keep them on a wallet and so on. And Bitcoin, the movement, is, you participate in conferences, you listen to podcasts, probably like this. You consume content, you learn about it, you're passionate about it, you wish to see it succeed, right? That is the movement. Whereas the tool is, hey, I need to make a transaction, or I need this guy to pay me. Need to solve this particular problem. And these are very, I think in the beginning of the history of Bitcoin, they were very much the same, right? It was this hackery, scratch my itch type situation. And so the movement arose among people who were using the tool. Over the years, more and more people came in because well, they bought Bitcoin and they want to see its value go up. So they're like financially motivated to be, and also they just want to be part of this sort of revolutionary society level change, right? So we have this movement that is very much about a tool, but where it's not necessarily required to use the tool to be part of the movement, right? So, I mean, a simple example, like name any tool, like scissors. Do you ever use scissors? Yes. Do you ever go to conferences about scissors? No. Why would you even do that? Would you listen to a podcast about scissors? No. Why? Right? And so that's like the tool attitude. It's just a thing. It just solves the thing that I needed to solve. Versus the movement where we have all of these discussions and so on, with vision, ideology, and passion, and all of these things. Another way of seeing it is, if you want to download, let's take software that's not movement connected, at least for me, like BitTorrent, for example. Say I want to download some piece of legal internet content in a big file, and I need a BitTorrent client. I would type into Google BitTorrent client, and I would get the first one, right? And then I would download my file, and I would be done. And I would move on with my life. I wouldn't necessarily engage with BitTorrent Twitter, with whatever technical discussions about different trade-offs of different solutions and protocols and client implementations, and all of these things that we argue about within the community, right? And there are plenty of people that are part of the movement that don't necessarily use the tools, right? I mean, you can be, and many, like most people that are part of the Bitcoin movement, I would say, are people that, hey, I think it's cool. I want this to exist, like truly and passionately. I want all of this, the censorship-resistant money, free flow of value over the internet. I want it all. I believe in it, and I want it to exist. But, I get my paycheck every month to my regular bank account, and I just split my Apple Pay, and it's fine, and it works. And I bought some Bitcoin on an exchange, and I keep them on a hardware wallet that I secured really, really well, so I can never get my Bitcoins out, even if I really wanted to. And so then I'm not really using the tools so much, but I'm part of the movement, right? And it's when you interact within the movement, it's sometimes very easy to forget that people who are part of the movement are not necessarily users of the tool, right? So you like easy experiment is like if you go to a conference, a Bitcoin conference, and just stop a random guy and say, hey, like which brand of Bitcoin wallet do you use? Okay, maybe which brand do you have on your phone? And then it's like, when did you last make a transaction? Right. And if it's in a conference, it's going to be like, yeah, well, I bought a T-shirt 5 minutes ago with Satoshis, but other than that, it's been 6 months, right? So you'll have people that are members of the movement, but not necessarily users of the tool. And then on the contrary, you have a large group of people that are users of the tool, but don't care about the movement, right? So say that you like recently, I heard a story of a developer in Russia that needed to get paid for work, and it's impossible to do so. So it's like, okay, well, I'll take Bitcoin. So that's a user, right? And what is he going to do for his thing? He's going to type in Bitcoin wallet into the App Store or into Google or whichever, and he's going to download the first one that looks legit enough. And he's going to get paid, and then maybe he's going to at some point buy something with it or send it to an exchange or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that person is going to mega engage with the community, start hanging out on Twitter, going to conferences, and all of these things, right? And so this is kind of the distinction, and something that I think was kind of non-obvious, at least to us in the beginning. Because we spend all of our time hanging out with people who are parts of the movement. We hang out on Twitter, go to conferences, all of these things. So you only see the movement section, the movement part of the Venn diagram. You never see the people at all, those who only use it as a tool and don't couldn't care less about any of the movementy things. And so it's a good framework for, I think, when building, especially like transactional services, to be mindful of that. You have your friends within the movement, and they're great, and they're your buddies. But then you also have your customers, and they might not be part of the movement. They just want to use the thing for the specific benefit that it provides to them, right? But the approach is very different in how you communicate with them and so on.
What's fascinating about this is you're essentially separating out as a user. You could be a passive user or an active user, right? It's kind of the way I think about it. And the passive user is the holder. And holding is definitely a use case. Holding is providing you the value of protecting your purchasing power and really kind of the store of value properties that I think people are very excited about Bitcoin. What you're highlighting, though, is there's a lot of folks.
But not even all holders are going to be part of the movement either, right?
Correct.
There's a lot of people that are like, oh, this Bitcoin thing, I don't even know what it is. I just buy some, and then I hold it in my Charles Schwab account, and that's it, right? And you would never see them on Twitter or in a conference or anything. And probably like a big chunk of Bitcoins are being used by people like that as well, right? So it's not sort of, these things are kind of orthogonal.
Well, what I think is interesting is not all holders are participants actively in the Bitcoin movement, but all active participants in the movement are likely holders. Right. So they at least, if you're participating in the movement and kind of the social component to it, you likely at least hold Bitcoin. Yes. But I think that you're highlighting another thing, which is not all active participants in the Bitcoin movement are active users of Bitcoin from a transaction standpoint. And so again, not all transactional users of Bitcoin are participants in the Bitcoin kind of social movement as well. And so there's almost this like different factions. Now, generally, they're all working towards the same goal. They are likely aware of each other. But I think what you're really calling out is, hey, the people who use Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis but are not participating in the movement, they may just not care. Right, the whole idea of like reinventing the financial system or any of this, like the big macro kind of importance or things that get the Bitcoin movement folks excited. The everyday user who is transacting in Bitcoin may just be like, look, I don't care about any of that stuff. I got to go to work. I got to get paid. I got to, buy food for my family. And like, this is the best way to do it for whatever reason. But what I do think it also brings is the people who are participating in the movement. A lot of those people are investors. They are entrepreneurs. They are the ones who are trying to build the infrastructure and services. And you're kind of ringing the bell and say, remember, the people at the conference are not necessarily all of your customers. And actually, if you build a product for the people who aren't at the conference, you may be better off than just simply building it so that the person at the conference is like, wow, look how slick this is. I can now buy Bitcoin using Apple Pay or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly like that. And I mean, it is natural. It's just that it creates this again that it's like it's a very obvious thing, but then like you spend all of your time consuming content from the movement and from the tool people. There is content from the tool people as well, but you never see it, and we don't even like, hey, which wallet should you use and so on.
Is it fair to say that we need both? That we need the people using the tool and we also need the people in the movement? Like both of them are important in order for Bitcoin to be successful? Or do you think that we have over-rotated on either side of kind of that equation?
Yes, I agree. I think both are important. Whether or not we've over-rotated, maybe. I think at least in the extent of like what the discourse is about within the movement, it becomes less and less about the use, and the discussion about the use is always about the holding use, not so much about the transactional use, right? Which I think misses a very big point, which is that a Bitcoin that you can't transact over the internet is kind of useless. It's even useless as a store of value. Like all of this is Satoshi 101, sort of. All of this stuff was discussed within the first month of Bitcoin. If you think of like how Satoshi motivates why Bitcoin should have any value at all, it's like, it's this scarce resource that you can teleport over the internet. Right. And if it had any value at all, then it would be quite useful because I can buy it here and I can sell it there and I can send it over the internet. And that's pretty cool. And why would it get any value at all? Well, because it might make sense to get some in case it catches on, right? And I mean, that is the history of
Yes.
in 1.5 Satoshi post. This is the history of the industry. But sometimes we get, and especially like because everybody in the movement is a holder, so we all want to hear things about on some level we want to hear about the impending collapse of the fiat system, or that the macro environment is such that we should expect the price of Bitcoin to be going up. It makes us feel good, and it's interesting, and it's an interesting topic. And so I think that like a lot of content ends up being created about these things, whereas some of the transactional use, like, but I don't even use that stuff. So why would I listen to content about something that I'm not looking to use anyway?
So one of the questions I have is when you think of Bitcoin and you go back to maybe 2017, obviously there was a lot of people trying to use Bitcoin from a transaction standpoint. Some of them were trying to buy it and move on chain between exchanges or some other form or fashion, and fees exploded upwards. And that was one of the big problems was people saying, hey, my transaction's taking too long, fees are too high, this is unusable from a transaction standpoint. The critics of Bitcoin pointed to that as a reason why Bitcoin would never work. And kind of we all, if you've been around, you understand kind of how that played out. Now, today we look and fees on the layer one are actually incredibly cheap compared to the historical norms. One of the things that the Bitcoin community will point to is say, oh, that's because of the rise of the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is for, smaller transactions. It's faster. It's cheaper. I know that you all at BitRefill have spent an enormous amount of time, money, and energy really investing in the Lightning Network and doing the best you can to see that come to fruition. I've invested in a number of companies that are either helping on the infrastructure side, that are actually using the Lightning Network, whatever. But what caught me, I think, a little off guard and many people off guard was you had a very sobering talk about the use of the Lightning Network and kind of where we actually are in regards to where you thought we would be at this point. And so is the Lightning Network overhyped? Is Lightning Network not actually working the way that you would have expect? Or is this just the classic story of hard technology takes a very long time before it is used on a global scale? This episode is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Good sleep is a game changer, and the 8 Sleep Pod is the best sleep machine. I sleep on it every single night. A great night of sleep allows you to be healthier, be more rested, and have more energy throughout the day. And on the brand new 8 Sleep Pod 3, you can sleep as cold as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as hot as 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the secret of thermoregulation. Better sleep, better energy. Get yourself an 8 Sleep. You can go to 8sleep.com/pomp today to go ahead and get $150 off your order. 8sleep.com/pomp. Not only do I sleep on it every night, it literally changed my life, and I begged the founders to let me invest in the company. 8sleep.com/pomp. Go get yourself an 8 Sleep Pod and get a better night of sleep.
I think that some people interpret it in that way. And the way that Twitter works is that the most extreme version of something and the most, what do you call it, conflict inciting version is the one that gets traction. So in the end, that's what the message ended up being, even though it wasn't. Like I was talking to Lightning builders at a Bitcoin and Lightning conference.
You mean that the meme Sergej is anti-Lightning is incorrect?
Yes, Sergej is incredibly bullish on Lightning. I think that, but also I think that like we need to be, we the builders need to be honest with ourselves, with what's going well, what's going badly, what can we do better? How can we get it to grow faster? I mean, Lightning is growing depending on which metric, but like 2 to 4x every year. That's pretty good, right? Yeah, that's pretty good. But also like in the crypto industry, we every once in a while see things that just like take fuck off in a big hockey stick, and Lightning hasn't really done that. So it's somewhere in between. I think that the thing that we need to understand is a lot of these things, and like how you described 2017. I wouldn't entirely agree with all of that, and I don't know if we should go into the details.
Yeah, explain.
Well, I mean, in 2017 was a world in which before then transaction fees were negligible. And so nobody cared about optimizing anything to save on fees or fee estimation and things like that. And so suddenly there was a boom cycle and people were sending coins to exchanges to sell them. And there was no optimizations in terms of saving on the data usage of transaction. There was no optimization, like none at all, optimizations on like fee estimation and so on. And it created like a big mess. What happened after that is that over the course of some years, there's been a lot of optimization. I think the biggest optimization that has happened isn't Lightning. It's not even SegWit. It's simply the fact that centralized exchanges have started batching their transactions. So when you're a big exchange and you have 100 people doing withdrawals per minute, then instead of making 100 transactions, you make one transaction with 100 different outputs, and that saves like half. Or actually, no, it saves like at scale 90% plus of the data usage. And so a big part of why you see load on the mempool being lower is related to that. I helped create a dashboard called the transactionfee.info that tracks a metric called payments, which counts these individual outputs to better have a view of like how many transactions in the sense that people normally understand, not in the Bitcoin sense. As we call them payments instead, like how many payments are happening. That number is growing steadily, but it's not, it's less than doubling every year. So it's growing at some pace. Lightning has a chunk of on-chain traffic that has moved over. But I think that a big part also because of like all of the events of 2017 being so deeply rooted in the psyche of the Bitcoiners and how we've, at the time, Lightning was presented as this the thing that will make it scale. And so in a lot of ways, it was a political thing because it was opposed to the other things that the other camp wanted to do, which was increasing the block size and stuff like that. So it became the case that Lightning is being marketed primarily to people within the movement, right? And so then it becomes that the users of Lightning are the intersection of people who are users of Bitcoin the tool and also members of Bitcoin the movement, which is definitely a non-zero group. And as we just established, it's growing. It's more than doubling every year. So it's definitely growing. But it is in some ways having trouble reaching the people that are not in the movement. Because everyone in Lightning is so deep in the movement, and that was kind of the purpose of my talk, is like, guys, we're all great, but let's look at the bigger world. And there's a lot of people that might use our things, but never get a chance to because they never find out that they exist because we are so focused to sort of people that are like us. Where in reality, many of the people that are like us in the movement are actually not users of transactional Bitcoin tools. And so like in terms of like user development, like their feedback can be counterproductive. Right. You should talk to people that are like 100% user demographic. And so that was kind of a little bit what was the purpose of my talk then. I think that I'm still incredibly bullish on Lightning. I still think that it is, the technology that is most likely to be what brings cryptocurrency to many people in a decentralized way. It's definitely far ahead of the equivalent layer 2 solutions in the Ethereum world. I'll say that. But I think it's important for us who are building, and Lightning by definition is a transactional tool, right? If your only usage of Bitcoin is to hold it in a hardware wallet or hold it in your Charles Schwab account, then you're not going to be a user of Lightning by definition, right? And some people might do it as a gimmick, like, I'll spin up a node, or hey, I heard Sergej said on Pomp's podcast that to be a good Bitcoiner, I should run a Lightning node, so I'll do that, right? So they do that, but it's not natural, right? And so I think that's like the important thing is to be mindful of the people that do use Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies on a transactional basis. And again, the question of like, oh, are they using other cryptocurrencies and shitcoins, this and that? Like, look, people who use it as a tool, we've already established, like most of them couldn't care less about any of the things that we are arguing over and which of the coins has the better decentralization properties or whatever. They just want to get their thing done. And so a good example that I've brought up is to look at the wallets that are being used in transactional usage, right? And there's different ways of getting that information. I think the fairest one is to just open the App Store on your phone or the Google Play Store and type in Bitcoin wallet. And then you can see what the algorithm has decided is the most likely that you will download, right? And that is what most people will download, and what most people that couldn't care less are going to use. And that paints a clear picture, because all of the wallets that we discuss in the movement, in the community, they're some of the best ones are there, sort of in the top 10 at least. It's like, hey, but like, hey, they're not anywhere near the top 3, right? Yeah. So and so that also means, even though we've spent all of this energy on education and preaching and explaining, and this is why you should use a wallet that's open source, and this is why you should care about this security property or that security property, all of these things, right? But again, the people that only want to use it as a tool, they never hear those things, right? They don't get exposed to that. They just typed in Bitcoin wallet in the App Store, and that's that. They're done. They got their job done that they wanted to get done. They got paid or they made the transaction that they wanted to do, and they're done. They moved on with their day. We're discussing, who's really a Bitcoiner, and what are the criteria to fulfill for that? But like, nobody cares, and they don't probably identify as Bitcoiners. And we can argue, should we count them as Bitcoiners? And who cares? It's just words, right? So yeah, I think that there's like these things are kind of like important to be mindful of. And then also, okay, once you picture. And I think you can, like, to some extent, by seeing a wallet and like maybe some geographical data and so on, you can a little bit picture the user, right? I mean, you don't even need to know their age or gender or whatever. Those are like the least interesting things. You just kind of like, okay, it's the user I got the blockchain.com wallet. Okay, what's that person like? Okay, interesting. And then you can kind of like, okay, they're in Nigeria. Okay, so you can kind of like, count backwards a little bit and like, okay, but how do we reach that user? How do we, create something that user might think is interesting to use in a completely transactional, non-loving way, right? Use is an excellent word here as like an opposite to love. They're not going to love Bitcoin, and I don't think that necessarily it's a requirement that everybody in the world, 8 billion people should all love and be passionate about Bitcoin. I think most people are going to use it as a thing and care about it just as much as you and I care about scissors. Scissors are great, but yeah, we go about a day.
No scissors conference. This begs the question of when somebody Googles and they go for a Bitcoin wallet, some results come up. But in order to get global adoption, do we need people to, instead of Googling Bitcoin wallet, Google payments or Google something that is non-Bitcoin related? And so they don't even know that they're necessarily using this new payment network. They don't know that they're using a different asset. It's just kind of pushed into the background, and they simply know that they're using a payments application that is cheap and fast, and it's better than whatever other products are available to them. And I kind of think of this in the sense of when I go to a restaurant and I go ahead and I purchase something, I have no clue Are they using the Visa network? Are they using a different network? All I know is I either give them cash or I give them a credit card and I'm able to buy what I want to buy. And, to your point, I don't care what the network is, right? It works. It did what it needed it to do and I'm out of there. How important is it for people to understand they're using Bitcoin or Googling Bitcoin wallet, Bitcoin payment app, something like that, versus just serving the need and actually them knowing that it is Bitcoin may not be as helpful as maybe we think it is inside of the movement?
I think it is kind of important because in the beginning of the conversation, you were asking me about like fintechs that don't start all the way from the bottom, but to start from some part of the incumbent system. And I think like a general rule of decentralization, let's say, is that a centralized solution will always be able to do technically everything that the decentralized can do, but it can also do more things, right? So the centralized will always be faster and better. From a UX standpoint, right? Where decentralization wins is in the areas where decentralization shines, right? So if you don't have access to the other things for whatever reason, there's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to use these things as a fallback, right? And so in some ways, like, but you can use Bitcoin. It is useful in that sense. And the other part, it will kind of happen anyway, that we're already seeing the challenger banks gradually adding Bitcoin functionality, gradually adding send and receive and so on, even though like they too are metrics driven and they see that most of the users of the Bitcoin functionality just want a number that goes up in value over time. And so we don't even need to build deposits or withdrawals. We just need people to buy it like a stock. But over time that will change. But I think it's still sort of, it is important that it has that brand. You can abstract it away, but then you just end up building a new brand, right? So you end up, for example, like if you watch in El Salvador, where the dominant wallet is the government wallet called Chivo. And there's people that are like, yeah, well, we accept Chivo here, right? And that's maybe an easier message. And it also is, the easiest one for 80% of the people to understand. And they don't need to care about what this Bitcoin thing is or any of that. But then you need to recreate the brand. The benefit of Bitcoin is that it is a brand. It is an open source thing that people know, just like internet is a brand or the web or whatever. And so there is definitely a value in using that. Yeah, I think both things, like, I don't know.
It's a hard one.
Tricky.
Yeah, it's a hard one. And I don't think there actually is a right answer, as much as what I get from your answer being sometimes it's important for the Bitcoin brand and Bitcoin's brand is an advantage. And then other times maybe there's a different brand or it doesn't matter as much. And somebody just wants to be able to have the functionality, and whether they know it's Bitcoin or not might not be as important. And so it's kind of a case by case basis. But what I do think is important is that violates the thought process, I think, of a lot of at least the companies and the entrepreneurs that I talk to in the Bitcoin community. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I constantly tell folks is your entire marketing message is towards what you would call the Bitcoin movement folks. Everything is, it's Bitcoin, use it because it's Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin. And I keep saying, listen, if you want mainstream adoption, if you want to get 50 million consumers using your payments application, there's a lot of people who see that it says Bitcoin and they just scroll to the next thing, right? They are not going to use it because it says Bitcoin. And so it's a blessing and a curse in some way.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's people that would not use something because it has Bitcoin.
Oh, 100%. There are people, especially in the developed world, who, if you just go on Twitter, go look at like Fintech Twitter, they hate Bitcoin. They think Bitcoin is the dumbest thing in the world.
Okay, so but by that reasoning, you would have expected Cash App to have a decline in user numbers since they added the Bitcoin option. Like, I don't think
not necessarily, because I think that most people who use Cash App they don't use the Bitcoin functionality.
Of course, right? That's what I mean. So like, it's just a feature, right? It doesn't hurt.
But Cash App, I don't think like this. Cash App's a good example. Cash App doesn't present itself in 100% of its marketing as a Bitcoin app. What they say is Cash App is a payments application. And oh, by the way, we have this feature around Bitcoin. What I tried to get across to a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs that I talk to is they show up and on the front of their slide deck is a Bitcoin payment app. And I tell them, I say,
but they're presenting it to you.
Of course.
Like that,
but even after I'm an investor, I tell them, listen, that is not going to get you tens of millions of consumers because the people who don't know about Bitcoin or the people who are the Cash App user who don't use the Bitcoin functionality, you're essentially boxing them out. And so instead, if you were able to say, hey, we have the cheapest, fastest payments, and you don't even talk about Bitcoin, it just happens to be the thing you use, and the people who care will go figure out that Bitcoin is the network underneath it, my guess is that you're likely to get more users on a global basis than running around saying it's a Bitcoin app, because it's all marketing, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, marketing is one of these things that is, because our movement is so tech centric, we tend to idealize the tech, and we always, like, all of us are techies in some way. Even those who are non-technical are kind of techie enthusiastic, and we kind of want to solve all of the problems with tech. Right. So like people are still solving the Bitcoin scaling problem. But like, hey, I got news for you. The Bitcoin scaling problem was solved in like 5 different competing ways in 2018. Like, move on. Like, Bitcoin has a marketing problem, so which we need to solve in order to get to the scaling problem. But I think I digress a little bit. I mean, you are absolutely right. And this is because we're part of this movement. Our friends are in this movement. The people that we interact with are in this movement. We want their love and respect and adoration, right? We want them to like us. That's a natural human instinct. But it's important to be mindful of whether or not if your customer base is 100% within the movement, and there's plenty of businesses that are very successful that are like that, where they're like, no, this is specifically for Bitcoin community members, and we're going to market it by becoming popular on Twitter, and that's great, and then everything syncs up. But if you're building something for the bigger audience, well, then you need to figure out how to reach the bigger audience, and that is non-trivial. And you're probably right that the people that seek out Bitcoin are going to seek out Bitcoin, and there's a lot of people that seek out different properties, right? But there's also that some of the properties of Bitcoin are not things that you can market really well. Right. You make the transactions that they don't want you to make. Don't put that on your App Store landing page. But there are plenty of use cases that are completely unproblematic, like, pay anybody in the world, or get paid from anybody in the world. Like companies such as ours that have people, I think now in 26, 27 countries. Like, figuring out how to pay people with the local payment system in all of their countries is a lot of work. It's easier for us to say, look, we can pay you in Bitcoin and you figure out how to receive it. It's part of the job is figure out how to get your paycheck. That's fair enough, right? And especially if you happen to live in a country that's not like one of the biggest countries in the world. It's like, you kind of have to figure out a little bit how people will be able to pay you to participate in the global work environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've heard you a couple of times say the word crypto. I heard you say Ethereum E when describing something else. You've also made a couple of comparisons in growth rates between maybe other areas of the crypto ecosystem that have exploded and maybe something in Bitcoin's only 2 to 4x. In the Bitcoin maximalist kind of most extreme view of the world, you are violating and you are committing blasphemy by even mentioning the word crypto, Ethereum, or anything else. Is it important to look at what else is happening in the crypto ecosystem, not necessarily to go and buy the assets or to trade them, but to understand growth rates and understand where users are flowing and what is working and what's not working from a technical basis? Or do you think it's all noise and instead people should just focus on Bitcoin and not look at anything else?
I think it is important to look, what we've used at Bitriffle is always to look at real transactional metrics, because that's what what matters for us, right? The thing is that, I think that part of the reason why Bitcoiners hate altcoins is because that it's a shadow of a dark thing that exists within Bitcoin. Like it is the same, like a lot of the energy in Bitcoin is this desire to like make money, right? You make an investment and the number goes up and suddenly you became richer. And that is, what the altcoin community took and refined and packaged and iterated on and, made it pop more. And like in most cases in scammy ways. Like, let me be very clear about that. I'm not recommending that you jump in head first to the shiniest object. But it does lead in some cases to easier like product market fit type interplays. And I can bring up one example. So one of the largest crypto wallets by active users is MetaMask, right? Which is a wallet that supports ERC tokens and it supports Ethereum, but also the chains that are EVM based, so Binance Smart Chain and Polygon and some of the others. That's why I say Ethereum me. MetaMask has grown in this way because, like, in that community, the thing that you do is to invest in different assets, and then you hope that they go up in value, and then you sell them, right? But you hold those assets within the wallet, and so the wallet becomes a center of interplay, and so because they've managed to package people's desire for number to go up with like a web connected wallet, they've seen traction. Like they appeal to this greed element that makes it very successful. Fine, like we can argue a lot on whether or not that's a good thing, whether or not that's desirable or whatever. But I think we can't argue about the fact that, well, it has a lot of users. And that means that they need to figure out user experience type issues. And so even if you want nothing to do with any altcoin, cryptocurrency, whatever, other than Bitcoin, it does make sense to look at how some of these things have been solved in that world where there is a lot of pressure by users. And my attitude with company building and product building is that you don't really know anything until you expose your product to users, right? And so I believe in incremental growth. I believe in finding something that somebody wants to use, and even in the early imperfect form. And then if they want to use it, but something bugs them, then they will complain. And that complaint is product development feedback. Like these are the things to work on. And so things that are used a lot tend to get their kinks ironed out a lot more. Like a dirt road that is traveled a lot will be pretty flat versus a dirt road that gets traveled rarely. And so, but it does create this tension because on ethical grounds, a lot of Bitcoiners don't want to create speculative tokens because, well, that's not what we're about. And we didn't show up here to build this decentralized token casino type thing. And so we kind of like, that's something else. But I think it is important to be mindful of the fact that a very, very large chunk of Bitcoin users will also use these things. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing. I'm not saying that it's desirable. And so I'm just stating a fact. And so you need to figure out, right, at which point it's a little bit like, like leadership. Like you can't show up to somebody and like, you're an asshole and punch them in the face and believe that they're going to like your ideology, right? So you need to figure out how to meet people where they are and then, figure out how to steer them in the direction that you would like to steer them. But I think that it is a bit of a problem in that the Bitcoiner ecosystem or part of it really has like kind of like isolated itself and like, look, we want nothing part of that. we want to build our entire new thing blank from the start, and we start from the bottom up. But then in the end, it still ends up like we can't, I think, decouple Bitcoin from crypto. I would argue that maybe it would have been desirable to do, but if we should have done that, we should have done that in 2013 or 14. At this point, it's like all of the infrastructure is the same, all of the users are the same, most of the investors are the same, and like a lot of the things are the same, and so it becomes really, really painful to decouple. And so if we can't. If say that you have a company that is a shitcoin exchange, let's say, to pick the word specifically, we can't go to them and say, "You guys are assholes, you're scamming people, but also can you please add Lightning?"
That's exactly what Bitcoiners do, though. That is literally exactly what they do.
Right, but so you kind of need to pick one of the two.
Yes,
right. And some people have understood that, and they're like, you know what, fine. We don't need to have Lightning on Binance. Let's build our own network. It's gonna be better. It's gonna have sharks and lasers and whatever. And it is growing. Like the Lightning network currently is multiplying every year steadily by any metric. So it's not that it's not working. It's just that, like, if you look at it from the outside, it's like you have this massive casino type galaxy and this small little solar system that is the Bitcoin only economy. That's the question, is like, if that's desirable, well, then we need to figure out. But even then, they do interact via the fiat system, right? So part of the Bitcoin only meme, it's not actually Bitcoin only. It's Bitcoin and fiat, right? They don't try to distance themselves from fiat. They just want to distance themselves from other things. But I think that from the purpose of the vision of a world in which millions and billions of people interact with money through their wallet on a daily basis, like probably somebody who currently uses this with Ethereum is easier to convert than somebody who lives deeply into the fiat world and wants nothing to do with anything crypto.
Well, I'll take it a step further, and people get real mad when I say it, but there are companies that claim to be Bitcoin only, but they take user funds and they store it in a custodian that is not Bitcoin only, right? Sure. And so in some way, the Bitcoin only company, which is now a marketing message because obviously they're not Bitcoin only, is paying a shitcoin custodian according to their definition, right? So like you're literally...
But it's a marketing message, and it's successful, and I'm of the school that, to some extent, like, don't hate the player, hate the game.
100%.
I think that we're in a world where, Coinbase was very dominant in the US and now is being attacked from multiple directions. And one of the directions is from the Bitcoin maximalistic side. And so it definitely makes sense to do something like that. I think from what I can see, it's working well. But that's the thing, is that it's very hard, to really, really, really distance yourself. But maybe it doesn't matter. Like, in some ways, like, I think, like, I've struggled with this stuff as well quite a bit. Like, I think I've landed at the point where, but this is like my own, I'm not arguing that other people should have the same ethic. Like, my ethic is that, like, don't promote altcoins, right? Mm-hmm. I don't, Bitrefill doesn't, we never have. But we do acknowledge the fact that there are people that use these things. And if they choose to use these things to make cryptocurrency payments for real world things, then we will provide that service for them. Not to sort of say that this coin is good, this coin is bad, you should invest in this or that. We don't promote any investments whatsoever. We're a tool. We're a thing. You can use it if you want, and if you don't, it's fine.
What's another good example, I think, is take a Coinbase, right? And a lot of people in the Bitcoin community have problems with Coinbase or whatever. They are responsible for onboarding a lot of people to Bitcoin. Now, did they onboard the most? Are they still onboarding as many people as the previous? Like, there's all these nuances to the debate. But at the end of the day, in the United States, Coinbase for a very long time, if somebody said, okay, I'm finally convinced, whether it was a podcast, Twitter, my friend, I read something in the newspaper, whatever, I'm finally convinced to buy Bitcoin, they would go to Coinbase and that would be their entry into the world. And so I think that is hard to kind of reconcile with the people who are upset at Coinbase for doing whatever. But I think is an interesting data point. Another example, and again, you get kind of in this world where like sometimes you don't even have all the information, but there's a company that helped a public pension buy Bitcoin, which sounds amazing. And they say that they are Bitcoin only, but then in the announcement, it says that the pension bought Bitcoin and Ether. And so again,
through a sister company.
well, again, like the question becomes like, if that company's the one who helped them buy Ether, should they then be blasted for not actually being Bitcoin only? Or is the thought process, hey, we went in, we explained to them Bitcoin, somebody on the investment team said, okay, fine, if we're going to buy Bitcoin, we also want to buy this other thing. And so as a necessary component to getting them to buy Bitcoin, we help them buy Ether as well. It goes back to kind of like, is there a purity test, or is the goal, yes, other things will exist, and it doesn't mean you have to promote them. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily push them forward, but you have to at least understand that pushing Bitcoin forward is not in a vacuum, and it doesn't mean that you have to kill everything else. Other things are going to exist. Like, for whatever reason, gold is still going to be around in 10 years. Right? But I don't see a lot of people saying, let's destroy gold. Gold is a scam. Let's go and get rid of it. They may say that it's going to go down in value. They may say it may get demonetized. But that seems like a very different argument than maybe what's being argued about everything else. And so it begs the question, like, is the other stuff and focusing and attacking all the other stuff just a distraction from the ultimate goal of pushing Bitcoin adoption kind of forward? Today's episode is brought to you by FTX US. They're a safe, regulated way to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. They've got very cheap fees, sometimes as much as 85% cheaper than their competitors. There's also no minimum fees, there's no withdrawal fees, or any other hidden fees. Ultimately, FTX US is trying to make it dead simple for you to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. They also now have digital stock trading as well, with no transaction fees and no payment for order flow. All you have to do is go download the FTX app today from the App Store and use code POMP, and you'll get some money back every single time you trade $10 or more. Again, go download the FTX app today, use code POMP, and every time you trade $10 or more, they'll go ahead and they'll give you some crypto back. The more you trade, the more you earn. Download the FTX app today.
I mean, I think you're digging into a very hairy subject here that probably will require several long-form conversations about. I mean, a lot of this stuff goes back to the history of Bitcoin and the history of altcoins, things like pre-mines and so on that have been seen as unethical because in most cases, vast majority of them it was.
Of course.
So, and that's something that's different from say gold. Gold is gold. It's been gold for thousands of years. So it's not that somebody is peddling you gold that they invented themselves. And I think that there is definitely, I mean, you can't blame people for arguing things according to their ethics, right? Some things are complex, right? Some things are both good and bad, especially companies usually are. And you can definitely, salute them when they do something good and complain when they do something that you consider to be bad. And just because somebody did something good in the past doesn't mean that they get a free pass to do something that you consider to be bad either, right? So it's a complex question, and I like to really understand it, especially if you're new into the space. That you really got to like study like the early days of it and how it evolved and so on. At the same time, like maybe the interesting question isn't that, yeah, right? And I think that in this time where people are arguing about words and phrasings and so on, maybe the interesting things like phrase your personal mission statement. Like, for example, like my mission statement is for more people to use Bitcoin, or my mission statement is for fewer people to use altcoins, right? Maybe both of these. There's all of these different variants and so on that get mixed up, right? And in a lot of ways, again, some of these things are kind of outside of our control because of market dynamics, right? Like Binance, as far as I know, is still the fastest growing company in the history of companies, or at least was in the beginning. And they were that because they were the best access point to the crypto token casino. It's tough, it's very tough to argue on sort of on moral grounds against market dynamics and the fact that humans are kind of flawed and greedy and just looking for the fast way to get rich here. I do think there's a place to explain and argue. Here's why I think this is good. Here's why I think this is problematic. And I think that there's a lot of cases where the Bitcoin only type movements have actually, helped people to avoid getting trapped in things. So it's complex, right? There's to me, I think that for me, the interesting question is about transactional use. And like, I want more people to transact with Bitcoin, on a regular basis. Like, that's my personal mission statement. And so if somebody chooses to transact with another cryptocurrency, that's not that's an opportunity for for achieving the mission statement. And probably going on the offense isn't the best way of achieving that goal. But people can differ in this, and it's a delicate subject, and you kind of like need to keep a lot of things in mind. If there was an easy answer here, we would have already seen it. Like, in the end, it's like a political question.
Yeah.
Should you conservative, or should you liberal, or should you Austrian economics, or should you Keynesian economics? Like, these are things that people argue about and have different views on. And it's a little tough, I think, to say. I think it's more interesting to approach from, like we were talking before, like from practical, from marketing standpoints, and so on. Like, what is effective at achieving a certain goal, a certain change that you want to see in the world.
Well, what I appreciate about your viewpoint is just at the onset, the world is complex. It's not black and white, and there's lots of nuance. And actually, two things can be true at the same time, or two things can be true at different times. Right? Your comment about a company who maybe people don't like can do something good, and a company that people do like can do something bad. And that's really hard to have that conversation on Twitter in 280 characters. And It's also really hard, I think, when the movement is kind of forcing a certain type of conversation, because it runs at sometimes counter. Right? You can imagine if everyone really, really likes a company within a movement and they do something kind of out of step, it's unpopular to say, hey, actually, I don't agree with that thing, or vice versa, right? As if everyone rails against a company in that movement and they do something good, it seems off, or it takes courage at times to say, hey, that company that nobody likes actually did something good, and we should celebrate the good thing they did. But it's complex, I think, to your point, and unfortunately, the internet does not allow for super nuanced conversations to allow people to have that usually.
I had someone proposed to me a theory, I forget who it was, unfortunately, about like the recent developments of the past couple of years, that during the years where the world was plagued by COVID, there were no conferences and so on. People weren't meeting in person. And so conversations happened mostly on Twitter, or maybe in longer form on podcasts. And at least on Twitter, it's very much so that you can't, like a nuanced analysis of something is antiviral. Like, if you write, here's some good things and also some bad things, it's going to go nowhere. What you should do is instead make 2 different tweets, right? Here's what's great about this thing and what makes me bullish, and it's going to go to the moon in that group. And here's what I hate about that thing, and what sucks about it, and you're going to get all the haters, right? And both of those messages are going to go viral. The newest one doesn't. Whereas in a world where people are meeting in person, having conversations with humans, it's quite like it's easier to establish nuance. It's easier to establish human relationships, ties, like mutual understandings of ethics. You know, like, hey, if this is a dude that I've met 10 times in 10 different countries over 5 years, we've gotten drunk and had adventures, this and that. I somewhat understand this person and what he means when he says this and that, even I might not disagree with that and so on, right? Whereas in a world where everything happens on Twitter, everything gets like super polarized, and you're evil here and you're good here, but eventually kind of like given the principle that one strike you're out, and everybody ends up in the evil crowd, right? And there's not even like there's not like the recent uprising against the maximalists, but like the maximalists are not a uniform group. They disagree and fight with each other a lot about all kinds of stuff, and like there wasn't even a successful attempt at defining what maximalism. Only like I know it when I see it, and so on. So it's tricky, and I think that a lot of newcomers to the space, something that people don't always recognize, I think, is that the crypto space is like it's a web of personal relationships, right? And these personal relationships span across the camps. They really do. That like you're gonna see a guy fight with another guy, and they hate each other and call each other the most horrible things. But you don't know that they have like 200 common friends, and most of them think that both of them are pretty good guys. Right. So you don't see these things if you're just observing from Twitter, and you don't sort of until you've hung out in the sort of speakers sessions and seen how people actually like hang out with each other when it's not that every word that they say is being scrutinized for potential heresy, but can actually like talk and like discuss controversial ideas. And sometimes it helps when discussing controversial ideas, it helps to be drunk, because then you can always like, hey, I was just being drunk, it's the best defense. So these things, like, I think that we kind of like went into such a direction. And so like the influencers that bubbled up were those that were like peddling one specific message over and over again, finding a certain demographic and so on. They kind of bubble up to the top, whereas the people that have like nuanced conversations about things and are capable to assessing from different perspectives kind of like phase out. But now sort of the world is like waking up again. People are meeting up, they're hanging out, and you're like, oh yeah, did you also think that thing was bullshit that is actually in our in-group? Yeah, me too. Let's not tell anyone, but we were just trying to discuss this. Right? And it's like these conversations are happening, right? And these bonds are forming over bonds of people that know each other in the physical world and have a friendship and mutual respect and appreciation. And again, these things are very hard if you're a newcomer to understand and see and to assess. And social media is one of these things where you like the people that rise are those who focus on it professionally or full time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the ones with the best views at all times, right? I guess I'm biased, but I like people who build things, and like companies or products or whatever. And like, yeah, well, if you spend all day, every day building stuff, you're gonna have less time to spend on Twitter, right? So those people's messages get a little bit muzzled down in such a world. With a few rare exceptions of people that are like exceptional speakers that manage to get it across. But like,
I think it makes a lot of sense. When people listen to this and they get mad at us for whatever random thing, we'll just tell them that we both were drunk, and it'll be a good excuse. Before we finish up, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was Bitrefill's been doing a lot of work in El Salvador, and everyone gets all excited about El Salvador. There's some people who think it's the greatest thing ever. Some people think it's an absolute dictatorship and not going so hot. I'm less concerned about El Salvador itself as much as this idea of the circular economy, and I know that you all are spending a lot of time, one, trying to understand what's happening, but also two, being helpful. Maybe you can describe a little bit as to what work you guys are doing there and what you're seeing that is working, and maybe where you're still seeing obstacles or challenges as you try to help.
Sure. So, I mean, when all of this ruckus about the Bitcoin law started happening, we kind of had several big team discussions. And I mean, again, our goal is a world in which it's as natural to transact in cryptocurrency as it is to have a conversation over a video call. And if it's so rare to have an environment where there's a country where, okay, first of all, there isn't a big incumbent payment network. The competition is physical cash. And the government is not trying to put sticks in your wheels, but actually, trying as best as they can to help and push these things, right? So we were like, you know what? Let's make a visionary, strategic bet on this. We go down to El Salvador. We see what we can do to get a circular economy going and to get it to spread right to the mainstream, to the people that don't necessarily participate in the movement, that don't necessarily love Bitcoin or anything like that, that might use it as a tool that lets them live their life in a better way. So we went down there in the fall of last year, I guess soon a year ago. We set up a local subsidiary. We hired one person at first, and then two more team members flew over. We set up a bill payment solution in El Salvador by partnering with a local company that does that. And so what it achieves is that you can pay your utilities or your mortgage or your credit cards or what have you with Bitcoin. On top of many of the other things that Bitrefill has, which is the gift cards for digital goods. That is also very popular, especially games were very popular among the youngsters in El Salvador, even before we showed up and made a concerted effort. And so what we're doing there is, again, like trying to create a circular economy, like trying to get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to use Bitcoin on a regular basis. And we're putting a lot of energy, much more than is appropriate for a country that size. But like what we say is that it's as easy as it's going to get. And it's still really freaking hard. Right. So the goal is, if we figure it out there, then we will have learnings and a playbook that we can apply on other countries that we can use for spreading the Bitcoin dream outside of the core group of movementarians. And so we've been there trying to do marketing. I mean, it's I very much recommend for Bitcoiners to go down there themselves. I think all of this becomes a lot more clear. It's a great country. There's beaches and surfing and Bitcoin stuff. And there's, even if you don't go during the time of a Bitcoin conference, there is always going to be a little Bitcoin meetup going on almost every night of people who are also there and exploring. And it's like a great hangout. So I very much recommend somebody planning a vacation to consider going there. I think in practice, we see that it's not so easy, even if the government is trying to help. But the government is the government, and governments are not usually famous for being great at pushing technological innovation on towards people, right? And so it's a little bit tricky. They don't always move in startup-y ways because government's gonna government. So the reality is that there are definitely people that are using Bitcoin, even outside of El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, and all of these areas, it's still not that like everybody does, right? So even though the law says that every company has to accept Bitcoin, but like, most companies don't, and they don't get persecuted for that or anything. But it's kind of like encouraged from a system level. But it's still hard. Like we're still fighting there against many of the classic Bitcoin issues. Like first time I heard a taxi driver there say that, yeah, I have some Bitcoin in my wallet here that customers paid me, but like I'm not going to buy anything with them. I'm going to save them in case it goes up in value. Yeah, right. Yeah, and it was like very like, okay, yeah, fair enough. This is the same. It's the same here as it is in anywhere else with these dynamics. There's also other dynamics that we're fighting against. I think the biggest one is that for people that are unbanked, which is like 70% of the population, like the notion of money is the notion of green physical dollar bills that you carry in your pocket. And so switching to a notion of money as being a number on your phone, even more a weird number with decimals and stuff. But even like just the idea of like that money is a thing that lives on your phone is hard for people to trust. Because is it real money if I can't feel it? And so that's the sort of things that we're up against. There's certain parts of society that are a little bit wary of Bitcoin because they perceive it as a government thing. Which is kind of interesting. So they're like, I don't know, the government, even if we support them, who knows what they might do and so on. And so there's like a big effort from companies like Strike and the Bitcoin Beach project and so on to promote alternative wallets that are independent and so on. But then again, you have the question of the Bitcoin brand and how does Bitcoin work and all of these things that make it tricky. So again, it's one of these things where when you have something with an exponential growth and you're in the early stages of it, you can make an excellent case for why it's going insanely great. It's like 5x every year. You can also be like, but it's still tiny. 99% of society isn't using it, and both of these things can be true. So it depends on kind of like how you choose to frame it, whether or not it's going well or not. It's still a massive challenge. And the companies that are there, I know that they're trying stuff, trying marketing, trying business models and schemes and so on to figure out, how to get it into the hands of people. And there's still a lot of different chicken and egg type problems. I'll give you an example. I guess like we're trying to figure out like how can we get, because El Salvador is a country where a big chunk of the population emigrated, and many of them live in the US now. And so like 20 or 30% of the economy is actually remittances, which is immigrants that now live, for example, in the US, sending money back to their relatives back home. And so this seems like a pretty obvious thing that Bitcoin would be very useful for that. And then the people who receive it can then use it to pay their bills or to shop with it or whatever. And it can actually fuel this circular economy because you'll have people that have coins to spend. But then it turns out that, well, it's actually really hard for a Salvadoran to buy Bitcoin in the US because in order to use any of the dominant buying Bitcoin services, you need to have I forget, an American Social Security number, which maybe you don't have. And so then you don't pass the KYC stage, and then you can't actually get Bitcoin. And so the only way that remittances, I think, maybe someone will correct me on this, are flowing is actually through like the government Chivo wallets that they put in places in the US where you can buy Bitcoin with cash. But like it's again, one of these things where, it shows the tension that we have when we don't have a circular economy and we're kind of tied to the current system and the regulatory framework. Some things become hard to do, right? And I mean, the Bitcoin dream is a world where remittances is not even a thing, right? We're not here to fix remittances. We're here to get rid of it. to obsolete that concept and put it next to long distance phone calls on the shelf of history. Because what do you mean you can't send money from here to there? Obviously you can, or like, hey, I get paid here and I buy pizza there. What's problematic with that? I mean, that's what we're heading towards, but it's hard, right? And it's hard, and the companies that are offering buy Bitcoin in the US are also struggling, to figure out the regulatory things that they need to be on the right side of the law and all of these things. And so, a lot of the stuff, it's not trivial. I think it is moving in a very promising direction. We're continuing to invest in our efforts in El Salvador and doing a lot more marketing experimentation there, where we're seeing some progress. I'm pretty sure that we're the number one thing that people buy with Bitcoin in El Salvador, just as we are anywhere else in the world. But it's still a very small sliver of society that uses Bitcoin on a regular basis. But it is growing at a good pace, and whether or not we'll be able to sustain it and how fast it'll grow, that remains to be seen. And we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we do grow in these ways. I guess that's a bit of the real talk. Probably this is going to get edited out because it was not bullish enough.
No, look,
but we're having the nuanced conversation here, so I'm giving you the nuanced answer, right? Some things are insanely great, some things are tricky.
It is closer to the truth than the extremes that are presented on Twitter. Right. And the bulls and the bears both have extremes that are presented.
Yeah. And they're both true. Like they're both representations of the same objective truth. Like we are somewhere on the early stage of what might be an exponential growth. That is where we are.
Yeah.
And the rest is a question of what kind of glasses you use to look at it. It's like Bitcoin is like that. It's the old elephant meme, right? Where like 5 blind guys stand next to an elephant, and it's like this part is rough and this part is smooth and it's pointy and whatever, right? So it kind of like brings out whatever it is in you. And I mean, there's a lot of things to discuss, obviously, about the politics of El Salvador. I don't think I'm the best person to do so. I think it's been well discussed on the internet by other people. Bitcoin isn't part of politics. I think most of the Bitcoin people that are in El Salvador are there for Bitcoin and for El Salvador rather than for the government per se. And maybe if the government is smart, they will see it that way as well. But again, it's complex. Even the government is not one thing. It's a lot of people that are interacting in different ways and have different understandings of things and so on.
I could not agree more. Where can we send people to find you on the internet or find out more about BitRefill?
Just go to bitrefill.com or find BitRefill on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter as well. I'm sure there will be a link in the show notes. I'm at Zigamon.
Awesome, Sergej. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed it, and I think your nuanced view and kind of what I perceive as your constant pursuit of the ground truth is admirable and I think important. It's fun to screw around on the internet, but at the end of the day, we do have to build products. We do have to continue to improve the tools so that people continue to use this stuff. So I appreciate not only your and your team's contribution in terms of doing that, but also your ability to just kind of remind people, hey, the tool is important and the movement's important too, but we do need to build stuff. And I think that a lot of people appreciate that message. So thanks so much for sharing it.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
All right. We'll definitely do it again in the future.